Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast.
Today, we are undertaking a truly monumental deep dive. We're plunging headfirst into the dark psychological architecture, moral complexity of Fyodor Dostoevsky's masterpiece,
Yeah.
known to many as Crime and Punishment.
But also in German, Schuld und Sühne, guilt and atonement.
Exactly. And that title, I think, it's closer to its spiritual core.
That dual nature is precisely why this novel is so foundational, isn't it? It's not a simple police procedural. It's a theological and philosophical battle fought entirely inside one man's head. Our mission today is to really unpack the raw source material that brings this internal conflict to life.
We're focusing on Rodion Raskolnikov, a 23-year-old former student who operates under this colossal delusion that he's an extraordinary man.
That a superior philosophy can grant him the right to transcend ordinary human laws.
Including the law against murder.
The premise is instantly captivating and, frankly, terrifying. Can a brilliant mind truly escape the innate shackles of morality just because it decides his victim is, quote, life unworthy of life?
And that's the core question the novel forces us to confront. What happens when Raskolnikov actually commits the act he rationalized, only to find that his own deep human conscience immediately and violently fights back?
The punishment begins the moment the crime ends.
Or even before. And that struggle is the true engine of the story. Dostoevsky himself confirmed this. In a letter from 1865, as the novel was taking shape, he said the story was never meant to end with the crime.
What did he write exactly?
He wrote that after the murder, unsolved questions rise before the murderer. Unexpected, unlooked-for feelings plague his heart. So this is a map of spiritual reckoning, not a simple chronicle of an offense. The punishment, we realize very quickly, precedes any legal sentence.
So we start with a psychological profile, not a crime scene sketch. It's a journey into why the guilt is felt and how that feeling forces the character toward either redemption or total madness.
To really appreciate that intensity, we need to look just for a moment at the man who wrote it, Fyodor Dostoevsky. His personal history is just. It's saturated with the very themes of suffering, intellectual extremism, and the possibility of redemption that define this work.
He lived through a mock execution.
He did. He was sentenced to death, brought out to the firing squad, and then his sentence was commuted at the last possible second. After that, he spent years in Siberian exile for revolutionary activity. He understood firsthand the fragility of life and the immense, crushing weight of isolation.
You can feel that experience coloring his work, can't you? There's this urgency and a deep skepticism toward abstract Western European intellectual systems.
Like the very utilitarian ideas that Raskolnikov adopts.
Exactly. Ideas that just completely ignore the messiness and contradictions of the human soul.
Absolutely. The novel, conceived around 1865, wasn't just a literary effort. It was a professional and maybe even a spiritual lifeline for him after a period of immense personal struggle. Gambling debts, personal loss.
And the genius of the idea was recognized immediately.
It really was. The publisher, Katkov, who was very experienced, saw the profundity of the theme right away, this struggle between a philosophical justification and just inherent human nature.
He called it a great literary stroke.
He did, and his recognition was concrete. He advanced Dostoevsky 300 rubles to secure the novel. That kind of immediate investment tells you just how revolutionary the concept was at the time.
And Dostoevsky's plan wasn't just about the plot. He explicitly wanted the novel to portray the consequences of unlimited arrogance and despotism.
The very traits embodied by Raskolnikov's extraordinary man theory, and this is key. Dostoevsky intended to show that this path of self-exaltation, of placing oneself above everyone else, inevitably leads the character, our 23-year-old Raskolnikov, to the exact opposite of what he wanted.
He's seeking power and freedom.
But his actions immediately plunge him into profound powerlessness, isolation, and spiritual collapse. The grand theory delivers nothing but fever and paralysis.
And that paralysis is so perfectly underscored by the physical environment. St. Petersburg in this novel is not the beautiful, rational, imperial castle. It's a suffocating, feverish city. It's almost a character in itself.
Toxic one, yes. It functions as the external manifestation of Raskolnikov's internal sickness. The sources just hammer this home. The Schrecklich hits, the terrible heat, the sheer, overwhelming congestion of the city center, packed with laborers and artisans.
A crowded, sweaty hellscape.
It mirrors his mounting mental fever. There's no respite, no space for clear thought.
And this external oppression is focused so acutely in his personal space, his room. It isn't just small. It's described in this deeply claustrophobic, dehumanizing way.
It's like a cupboard or a chest. Schrank oder einer Trimmen. It's barely a living space.
It's a cell.
It is. This tiny, yellow, wallpapered space where he spends days just brooding. It fuels his desperate, almost physical need for scope, for weight. The confinement restricts his thinking, pushing him toward this radical solution that promises expansion and freedom. He literally cannot breathe until he bursts forth with this act.
The yellow of the wallpaper, that sick color, becomes the filter through which he sees the world.
It symbolizes his pathological state long before the crime is even committed. The psychological connection is established from the very beginning. Raskolnikov is suffering from a fever of the mind, and the physical world just makes it worse.
It's the perfect pressurized vessel for a toxic idea to grow and really to metastasize. He's suffocating under the weight of his own intellect and his poverty.
And the foundational tragedy of Raskolnikov is that he isn't really driven by need, but by this abstract conviction. He's an intellectual, and he adopts a utilitarian and profoundly dehumanizing justification for the crime.
Rooted in this idea of the extraordinary man.
And his target, the old pawnbroker, Aljona Ivanovna, is defined entirely by her uselessness. He argues she is no better than a louse. Nicht besseres als eine Laus.
Therefore, killing her isn't just permissible.
It's a necessary act of liberation. A Befreiungstat. She's a parasite taking exorbitant interest, 5, even 7% a month. By removing her, he believes he benefits humanity and, maybe more importantly, proves his own superior nature.
But this intellectual clarity it shatters under the pressure of actually doing it.
Completely. The distance between the fantasy and the awful reality creates this intense mental torment leading up to the attempt. He keeps trying to dismiss the plan, telling himself it's only a game of my imagination. Yes, mere trifles, nothing but trifles.
That self-talk, that contemptuous spitting at the idea. That's his subconscious trying to save him from his own theory, isn't it?
It is. Yet because he can't stop thinking about it, he becomes involuntarily accustomed to viewing this abominable dream as a real intention. The idea becomes a physical weight he has to carry around.
And his preparation shows that conflict. He conducts this exploratory trip, this rehearsal.
The Versuch signs for happens, yes. He does it specifically to memorize the location. The yellow wallpaper, the old furniture, the large sofa. He's seeking concrete, physical details to anchor his floating, abstract idea, but every step he takes toward making it real only increases his paralyzing anxiety.
And when the moment of the crime arrives, it's almost banal. It's mechanical. It's totally devoid of the grand Napoleonic triumph he imagined.
He uses a silver cigarette case as a pawn distraction, a small, pathetic decoy for what he considers a world-altering philosophical crime.
Once he's inside, the description is just so visceral and disorienting. It highlights how removed he is from his own body.
He hears the lock being removed, the door opening, just a tiny crack. He's so consumed that he barely feels his own body. He takes the axe, which he's hidden in a sling under his coat, and he kills Aljona Ivanovna.
And the theoretical purity of his utilitarian crime dies instantly with the unforeseen arrival of the second victim. Right, Lisaveta, this was the one variable he failed to calculate, and it immediately proves his whole theory is unsound.
The sources make her murder just devastating because she is so explicitly innocent, even by Raskolnikov's own brutal logic. She's described as this large, clumsy, shy, subservient, and almost feeble-minded old maid of about 35.
Treated like a slave by your sister.
Exactly. Her murder is terrifyingly random and completely unnecessary for his plan. Her death shatters the notion that this was a targeted, rational act of liberation. It reveals Raskolnikov not as some philosophical titan, but as a clumsy, panicked killer.
So if the first murder was an intellectual error, the second murder is a spiritual catastrophe.
The collapse is immediate, and it's total. Raskolnikov thought he was preparing for a victory, but instead he's just overcome by this dull, heavy feeling of sickness.
That brief surge of manic energy he felt right before.
He realizes it was just a sickly symptom of his impending collapse, not resolve, just fever.
The disorientation is overwhelming. The most terrifying moment, I think, for the reader and for him, is the arrival of those two unexpected visitors.
Koch and the student Pestjako, yes. They knock loudly and they start arguing over whether the door is locked or just bolted. Very guilt.
And that tension is just. It's agonizingly drawn out. Raskolnikov is frozen behind the door.
Clutching the axe, ready to fight them if they break in, He's caught in this state of feverish paralysis, unable to act or think clearly. His body is acting on pure, terrified instinct, which is the absolute antithesis of his philosophical calm.
He eventually escapes and just collapses on his divan. He's not sleeping, he's just dozing in and out, consumed by fever and hallucinations.
That state of semi-consciousness is Dostoevsky's way of showing that the mind, when it's severed from morality, it can't find rest. It just has to cycle through the horror again and again.
And when he finally gets enough clarity to check his clothes, the physical evidence is this grotesque reality check.
Thick, clotted blood on the frayed trouser hems. He frantically cuts it off with a large penknife. He's trying to clip away the evidence, but he's really trying to clip away the fact of the crime from his own memory.
And this is where his intellectual arrogance completely fails the test of practical crime. Despite months of planning, he commits a massive oversight.
He completely forgets to hide the wallet and the other items he took from the chest.
Yeah.
He only realizes this much later.
It just confirms he is absolutely unsuitable for this kind of calculated crime. He's not an extraordinary man.
Not at all. He's saved only by Zufall, by chance. And the fact that the initial police investigation goes in a completely different direction, not by his own skill or brilliance.
That internal sickness is then externalized in that recurring nightmare he has. The one with the horse.
The haunting dream of Mikolka beating the tough horse, the Zahiz V, to death with a crowbar. That nightmare is central to understanding his guilt. The image is one of senseless, prolonged, agonizing cruelty.
And the crowd is shouting, "Take an axe and just finish her off."
Exactly. The dream forces Raskolnikov to confront the brutal reality of the violence he enacted. It's not about abstract utility, it's about the sheer pain and unnecessary suffering he inflicted. It connects his philosophical crime to the most base acts of animal cruelty.
And once he finally gathers himself, driven by panic, he makes this frantic, meticulous effort to hide the loot he forgot about.
He finds a secluded corner behind a gate. And to hide the evidence, he uses this heavy stone 1.5 pud, which is about, 40 to 60 pounds, and he hides the valuables and the wallet in a hollow underneath it.
But even in that act of hiding, the philosophical crisis comes rushing back.
He asks himself, if I did this consciously, with a firm goal, why haven't I even looked inside the wallet to see what I plundered, for which I undertook so base, abominable, and vile an act?
The loot is meaningless to him.
Completely. The crime was purely theoretical. The immediate and total punishment he receives is not from the police, but from this sense of boundless, almost physical disgust toward everything and everyone. He now exists entirely outside of normal humanity. He's a pariah in his own mind.
He is simultaneously the judge, jury, and condemned.
Precisely. His real punishment is that separation from the human fold.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
So Raskolnikov's intense internal crisis is then immediately juxtaposed with the overwhelming reality of St. Petersburg's social misery. This transition is essential.
Right, because he justifies his crime by claiming to liberate society from his parasites, but he's surrounded by people suffering far more real, immediate injustice.
And his first crucial social encounter introduces us to the Marmeladov family.
The civil servant, Marmeladov, trapped by alcoholism, who tells Raskolnikov his whole tragic story in a tavern.
It's a desperate bid for recognition. And his wife, Katerina Ivanovna, is just as tragic. She's driven by noble feelings, but is easily irritable and explosive because of her worsening consumption, her Schwindsucht. She's clinging to the pride of a once respectable woman, even as she starves.
Their poverty is absolute. But the most agonizing part of it is Sonia, Marmeladov's daughter.
To support her family, she's forced onto the street with the infamous yellow ticket, the Gelber Schein.
Let's pause on that yellow ticket for a moment because its significance is just crushing. It's not just a permit for prostitution, is it?
No, it's a permanent social marker. It essentially seals her fate, marking her as an official pariah, cutting her off forever from respectable society. It's a state-sanctioned condemnation. It removes any possibility of earning a legitimate living. Social death, essentially.
A formal legal mechanism for it.
Yes. Yet despite her profession, what Raskolnikov later calls unzucht, unchastity, or moral impurity, she retains this untouched fundamental inner purity, and it's demonstrated through her immense self-sacrifice.
The sources show these heart-wrenching details. She gives them money not just for food, but for items of pride, like a clean collar and cuffs for her stepmother.
So Katerina Ivanovna can maintain the illusion of respectability. Marmeladov even recounts, with incredible shame, kneeling and kissing Sonia's feet. He acknowledges her martyrdom.
But the cycle of sacrifice is just perpetually sabotaged by his weakness.
He steals the last of his salary, 23 rubles and 40 kopecks, from his wife's strongbox to go drinking, leaving the family destitute all over again. Raskolnikov witnesses this whole moral catastrophe unfold.
And the narrative then shifts back to his own sphere of middle-class desperation with the arrival of his mother and sister.
Polkarija Alexandrovna and Dunya, and they bring with them a new moral complication, an impending marriage.
Right. The mother's letter details Dunya's engagement to this Pyotr Petrovich Luzhin. He's a relative of Svidrigaïlov's dead wife, Marfa. He's harsh, but he has money.
And he's pushing for the wedding quickly, either before the upcoming fast, the fasten, or right after the Assumption of Maria Himmelfahrt.
Raskolnikov, even in his fever state, immediately sees right through the pretense. He sees the cold, calculated scheme.
Luzhin has worked his way up from nothing, and he views Dunya's poverty as desirable because he believes she'll be totally dependent on him, perpetually grateful.
It's a transaction. It's designed to feed Luzhin's ego. He even expects her to live without her mother after the marriage.
Ensuring Dunya has no social or emotional safety net aside from him. Raskolnikov realizes his family is hoping for Luzhin's imaginary, magnanimous feelings, a hope he just scorns as a Schillerian, beautiful soul delusion.
That's a key phrase. What's the significance of that Schillerian beautiful soul delusion here?
It refers to this romantic, sort of naive belief rooted in the German poet Schiller's idealism, that a person, even a ruthless man like Luzhin, will inherently act nobly and virtuously, even against their own self-interest. Raskolnikov scorns it because he knows Luzhin is governed by ego and calculation, not innate goodness. He sees Dunya sacrificing herself.
And the mother's financial state confirms this desperation. A 120 ruble pension minus debts, plus 20 rubles a year from knitting and embroidering, they're completely reliant on this fantasy of Luzhin's noble nature.
A fantasy Raskolnikov knows will be destroyed, and this impending sacrifice makes him question his own high-minded theoretical crime when he's confronted with these very real, immediate moral crises affecting his own family.
The novel's tension then just escalates when Raskolnikov is dragged back into the world of officialdom.
Starting with that terrifying false alarm at the police precinct with the officers Ilcha Petrovich and Nikodim Fomich.
He's summoned not for the murder, but for a trivial debt claim from his landlady, Praskovia Pavlovna.
The relief he feels is massive, but it's instantly reversed when he overhears the officers discussing the axe murder case, the Alte mit dem Beil.
And the external threat, combined with the extreme sickness he's suffering, causes him to faint right there in the precinct.
It's a massive, uncontrollable physical confession. He immediately realizes his involuntary reaction has drawn suspicion. The debt, the timing, the collapse, it puts him firmly on the investigative map.
And that accidental self-incrimination sets the stage for the true psychological high point.
Yeah.
The philosophical duel with Porfiry Petrovich.
The investigating magistrate, the Untersuchungsrichter, and Porfiry is a masterpiece of subtlety, middle-aged, corpulent, clean-shaven, with these light blue, penetrating eyes and a tendency to bluff.
He's not looking for physical evidence. He's playing a game of mental chess.
And he already has a huge edge. He reveals he's read Raskolnikov's signed essay on the psychological state of the criminal, published 2 months prior. The interrogation instantly becomes an intellectual confrontation over Raskolnikov's own theory.
And Raskolnikov willingly confirms it, this core of his delusion, that extraordinary men have the full right, voll Recht, to transgress moral obstacles, including murder, if the goal requires it.
This is a direct philosophical challenge to Christianity, to law itself. He asserts the right of a few superior beings to act as moral free agents, above the law that applies to ordinary men, or the louse.
He adds that if an ordinary person kills, they must suffer the punishment. Their suffering is their penalty, along with forced labor.
And Porfiry, subtly and with this chilling insight, just picks apart the cruelty and logical flaws of this stance. He knows Raskolnikov hasn't acted like a true extraordinary man. He's acted like a sick, terrified, ordinary man.
His whole strategy is based on baiting Raskolnikov psychologically.
Letting the internal guilt do the work of the police. Raskolnikov's loyal friend, Razumikhin, whose name is related to Verstand, or Reason, is also there trying to defend him.
Right. Razumikhin argues that the killer had to have been inexperienced and uncalculating, saved only by Zufall, by chance. He sees it as a fluke.
Which is a crucial defense that Porfiry's actually happy to hear, because it shifts the focus away from Raskolnikov's motives and toward his clumsiness.
And then Porfiry uses that masterful tactic, the false lead of the two painters, Mikolka and Matrish.
He starts asking Raskolnikov leading questions about them and the empty apartment, hinting that he knows Raskolnikov visited the murder scene earlier to rehearse his plan.
Raskolnikov's heart must have just stopped. Porfiry is forcing him to mentally rehearse the crime all over again, right there in the interrogation room.
Exactly. And this culminates in Porfiry's classic psychological retreat. The sudden, seemingly kind apology, claiming he verwechselt, he mixed up the stories. He suggests Raskolnikov is just ill and needs rest.
He grants him a reprieve, but the seed of doubt, he knows, is deeply planted.
Ensuring Raskolnikov's fever and paranoia will intensify until he breaks himself. Porfiry is essentially sending him back out into the world to be tortured by his own nature, knowing that he will be compelled to return.
Raskolnikov's fever does break, though, for a brief, compassionate moment during the Marmalade memorial.
When the father is tragically run over by a carriage and dies, Raskolnikov, driven by a genuine human impulse, uses his remaining money, the money from his mother, to pay for the funeral.
It's his first act of self-sacrifice, a crack in the extraordinary man philosophy. But the memorial dinner just descends into chaos, thanks to Luzhin.
Luzhin's ultimate pettiness and calculated malice. He orchestrates a vile frame-up. He plants a 100-ruble note on Sonia and publicly accuses her of theft.
Hoping to destroy her credibility and disgrace Raskolnikov by association, it's purely strategic.
Right. Raskolnikov explains it. If Luzhin proves Sonia is a thief, he justifies his anger toward Raskolnikov and reestablishes his moral leverage over Dunya. He destroys the family's support system.
But his malice is exposed.
By the key witness, Lebesyatnikov, who was there when Luzhin planted the money, he intervenes and exposes the fraud. It's a vital moment showing that moral truth can still triumph in all that squalor.
And following this, Raskolnikov visits Sonia's room.
He's initially repulsed by her poverty and her existence, which seems to him to defy all rational moral structure. But he recognizes that her inner purity has somehow been untouched by the Unzucht, the prostitution. He sees only 3 logical paths for her: drowning, madness, or hardening into vice.
But her survival defies his logic.
Exactly. He realizes she is a Gott-Snaren, a God's fool, someone whose immense, unwavering faith allows her to transcend her circumstances and remain spiritually whole. This is a direct affront to his intellectual atheism.
And the pivotal moment is when she reads the story of Lazarus' resurrection from the New Testament.
She reads, visibly trembling, connecting her own existence, and Raskolnikov's, buried alive by guilt, to the need for ultimate spiritual renewal.
That reading cracks his resolve.
He finally confesses, first obliquely saying he killed Lisaveta, she was murdered with the axe, and then revealing that he is the killer.
And Sonia's reaction is overwhelming despair, not condemnation. She believes there is no unhappier person in the whole world than him.
And even in this moment of raw confession, he's still trying to rationalize it as an act of will. He declares, I just wanted to dare Sonia, that's the whole reason. Ich wollte es nur wagen, Sonia, das ist der ganze Grund.
He's clinging to the theory, but his conscience has already surrendered. Sonia urges him toward salvation through suffering, telling him to kiss the earth and confess.
Just as he's poised between confession and continued torment, the final, most unsettling element of the novel arrives. Arkady Ivanovich Svidrigailov.
Dunya's morally bankrupt former employer. He's tall, strong, with this unsettling practiced casualness.
Svidrigailov is Raskolnikov's shadow self. He represents what Raskolnikov thought he was, a man who can commit moral crimes and exist outside of conventional guilt. He embodies the successful, cynical nihilist.
His moral decay is palpable. He confesses to seeing the ghost of his dead wife, Marfa Petrovna, 3 times.
Suggesting his own psychological instability and underlying guilt, which he seems to manage with this calculated indifference.
Yet he performs these shocking acts of charity. He claims to have excess money, plans to care for Katerina Ivanovna's children, setting aside 1,500 rubles for each. Is that genuine or just another manipulation?
It's complex. It highlights the arbitrary nature of nihilism. If nothing matters, then cruelty and generosity are equally meaningless acts. But the crucial information he has is the key to Dunya's independence.
Marfa Petrovna bequeathed 3,000 rubles to Dunya in her will,
removing Luzhin's main source of leverage. Svidrigailov then forces a final confrontation with Dunya. He locks the door, reveals the truth about Raskolnikov's guilt, and uses it to try and blackmail her.
But she fights back. She shoots at him with a revolver he gave her, but she misses.
And in that final moment of clarity, he realizes she will never be his. Her spiritual rejection frees him from his obsession. He gives her the key and leaves. His practiced casualness extends to his dramatic suicide.
He shoots himself in the head near a fireman's watchtower, telling the witness he's going to America.
The final, ironic joke of a man rejecting all consequence. His suicide provides Raskolnikov with a necessary visual lesson. This is the end result of successful nihilism, a moral vacuum that leads to self-destruction.
With Svidrigailov gone, Raskolnikov is left alone to face his fate, and Porfiry Petrovich, the master psychologist, knows he'll come to him.
The final confrontation is really about spiritual breaking. Porfiry, knowing Raskolnikov revisited the murder scene, uses that butterfly before a candle metaphor. He assures Raskolnikov he doesn't need physical evidence. Psychological law will deliver him any.
The criminal is compelled to return to his crime.
Porfiry offers him a chance to turn himself in to lessen the sentence, arguing Raskolnikov is not a hopeless base scoundrel, but a man who thought up a theory and is now ashamed that it failed.
He sees it as an intellectual fever, something that can be cured through suffering.
And Porfiry's patience pays off, but the interrogation is interrupted by the final twist of fate.
The painter, Mikolka, bursts in and confesses to the murder.
He claims it was due to religious mania and a need for suffering. And this is a profound moment. This false confession gives Raskolnikov a clear, immediate path to freedom.
A get-out-of-jail-free card. Literally. The authorities have a credible, willing convict.
He's been absolved by chance, by Zufall.
Yet he is tortured by his großes Unglück, his great unhappiness, and this feeling of isolation. His conscience, fueled by Sonia's love and his mother's support, it triumphs over his intellectual arrogance.
He actively rejects freedom in favor of moral necessity. He goes to Sonia one last time, confirms his decision, and finally confesses to the authorities. He gives them details only the killer could know, proving Mikolka's confession is false.
It's the ultimate rejection of his theory. He's choosing to become an ordinary man who must suffer for his crime.
His sentence is mitigated due to the psychological nature of it all. Witnesses claiming temporary insanity, fever, his former generosity.
And he performs that final symbolic act of atonement, fulfilling Sonia's instruction.
He goes to the Haymarket, the Hewmark, kneels down and kisses the earth, confessing his crime to the world. It's the ritual acknowledgement that the suffering of the earth, the simple natural world, is necessary for his redemption.
So if we step back now for our takeaway, what is the central statement of this monumental text?
I think the central statement is the undeniable failure of pure intellectualism and the extraordinary man theory when it's confronted with inherent human morality. Dostoevsky argues that the true punishment for the murderer isn't the external legal process, but that immediate, overwhelming feeling of separation and detachment from humanity. The spiritual and earthly law compels a criminal to seek redemption through suffering in order to return to the human fold. Raskolnikov couldn't escape the law of his own nature. He had to realize that to be truly exceptional, you must first be fundamentally human.
And Porfiry suggested that Raskolnikov's theory was merely the predictable arrogance of a young man suffering from a fever. But the question remains for you, the listener. Is the temptation to apply radical intellectual theories, whether political, social, or deeply personal, to justify transgressing human boundaries always a sign of inner sickness, or is it merely the predictable consequence of isolation? What theories in our modern world justify the destruction of the louse today, and what happens when the human conscience inevitably fights back? That's something to mull over until our next deep dive.